Welcome back, everybody, to the discussion where we really dig into the science of health and longevity, but really in a way that actually makes sense for your life. You hear some of these discussions, and it's all over the map. And this one, I really like to make it so that it makes sense for your life. And I'm Dr. Partha Nandi. I'm a board-certified gastroenterologist and a New York Times bestseller of Heal Your Gut, Save Your Brain. And that book is really about the gut-brain axis. And today, we're talking about the chicken or the egg conversation, right? Does your diet control your mental health? Or hey, does your mental health control your diet? Important question, right? Because I think that it could go either way if you think about it intuitively. We'll also dive into something that a lot of my patients are talking about, right? Dr. Nandi, how does sugar interact with my body and brain? So we'll talk about how that happens. How does sugar interact with your brain and body? So that's a fascinating and complex relationship between the food you eat and how you feel. I mean, I've been there. I remember eating, a bunch of pizza and those mozzarella cheese sticks or whatever they are, and you don't feel very good, right? And so, what do you guys think? Is it that poor nutrition leads to depression and anxiety, or do mental health struggles really push you towards junk food? Have you ever been there where, you feel horrible and you get on your couch and, start eating a bunch of crap? The classic, you see in these movies where somebody takes out like a pint of ice cream and start eating it. So is that what happens? Does your mental health struggle actually push you towards junk food? And we call this reverse causality. Big word, right? And how it shapes really our understanding of food and mood. So what exactly is this word reverse causality? I don't always love big words because I think that they sound cool and make you sound smart, but it doesn't really mean anything. But that word it sounds very super scientific, right? The reverse causality, but it just means that cause and effect aren't always clear cut. So think about it like this. If you see someone carrying an umbrella, you might assume it's raining. But what if they just think it's going to rain? Which came first, the rain or the umbrella? Now apply that to diet and mental health. Studies show that people who eat healthier, well, they tend to have better mental health. But here's the twist. Do they feel better because they eat well, or do they eat well because they feel better, right? I'm trying to trick you guys here. And really it gets tricky here. Let's explore really the kind of the complex relationship between diet and mental health, where the challenges of reverse causality kind of blurs the line between whether your diet affects your mental well-being or if your mental state influences your food choices that you make, right? So let's talk about understanding this reverse causality a little bit more. It's a concept in epidemiology where it's really unclear whether variable A, whatever that is, causes variable B. So like food and your mood or your mental health would be like, for example, A and B. In the context of diet and mental health, right, reverse causality can manifest in several ways. For instance, while a healthy diet is often really associated with better mental health outcomes, but folks with poor mental health may kind of go towards or gravitate towards unhealthy dietary patterns. And so this kind of makes it kind of murky, obscures the direction of the relationship, right? There's also something called the comfort food phenomena, right? So what the heck is that? Well, one example of reverse causality in diet and mental health is the consumption of comfort foods. So comfort foods, you know about that, like, I don't know, ice cream is a comfort food, eating a big piece of cake, comfort foods, typically high in fat, sugar, and calories, but we all kind of like, I love it, but they're not good for you. And they're often consumed in response to stress, low mood, or emotional distress. And so mac and cheese, burgers, all the rest of it, cookies, ice cream, we all have kind of go-to foods when life feels overwhelming. I don't know about you, but I certainly have had that in my life, right? And I'm sure you do. We all can sometimes be driven to sweatpants and Netflix and ice cream after a tough day. I'm sure a lot of you can relate to that. So why do we do this, right? Why the heck do we do this? Science shows that these foods trigger something called dopamine. It's kind of the brain's feel-good chemical. It's a mini reward system, and you may have heard of this dopamine before, right? Kind of what happens is that you have a bad mood, eat comfort food, feel a little better. While these foods can sometimes give you temporary emotional relief, the problem is this: their long-term impact on mental health can actually be worse or detrimental. That's the problem here. So emotional eating is a huge problem. Individuals experiencing anxiety, depression, or stress can actually turn to comfort foods like the ones I talk about, like ice cream or the like, as a coping mechanism. And these foods, what they do is trigger the release of dopamine. And this is a neurotransmitter associated with pleasure and reward, and it takes away some of your cognitive ability of thinking. It just goes right to, I want pleasure, and it provides temporary relief from negative emotions. So the consumption of these unhealthy foods can lead to nutritional deficiencies, and this is, as a physician, I think it's critically important to talk about, right? Nutritional deficiencies, as well as inflammation and hormonal imbalances, all of which can be linked to poor mental health outcomes. We're in a crisis of mental health problems in our nation and the world, to be in fact. There's a crisis for depression, anxiety, and suicides. To me, it's terrible, but preventable. Right? The initial choice to consume these foods is often driven by existing mental health challenges and illustrating reverse causality. Now let's talk about comfort foods, right? We talked about this, mac and cheese, burgers, all that stuff we talked about. We all have these go-to foods when life feels overwhelming. And I mean, how many times have you reached for a slice of pizza after a tough day? So why do we do this? Science shows that these foods, like as I discussed, trigger dopamine, the brain's feel-good chemical. Again, it's a mini reward system. Bad mood, eat comfort food, feel a little better. But here's the problem, it's a short-term fix with long-term consequences. These foods don't nourish your brain. They cause blood sugar crashes, inflammation, and gut imbalances, which can actually, guess what, make your mood worse. Wow, right? You did this to kind of help your mood, and it can make your mood worse. Vicious cycle, your mental health suffers, so you eat poorly, and that poor diet further fuels what? Your mental struggles. And it's a classic case of reverse causality in action. So I would like to talk about carbohydrates, sugar, and dopamine, how they affect insulin, right? And talk about the science. So carbohydrates, and we know them as sugar, right? And in this case, particularly sugar and refined carbs, right, can have a powerful impact on dopamine and insulin levels. This interaction, it plays a crucial role in emotional eating, cravings, and weight gain and mental health. So I'll break it down step by step. So first is sugar, dopamine, and the brain's reward system. When you eat sugar or refined carbohydrates, and when I talk about refined carbohydrates, I mean white bread, pastries, what about soda? Right? They quickly break down into glucose, causing a rapid spike in blood sugar levels. But this isn't just about energy. It's also about how sugar affects your brain's chemistry, especially your dopamine, right? The dopamine hit is what I'll talk about next. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter associated with pleasure, reward, and motivation. The moment sugar hits your tongue, the brain releases dopamine in the nucleus accumbens. And this is the same region activated by stuff like cocaine, right? So it's important to understand that. This rush of pleasure, it creates an intense craving to do what? Eat more sugar, feel that same intense pleasure, reinforcing the cycle of emotional eating. And the more sugar you eat, the more your brain associates sugar with pleasure. Over time, your brain downregulates dopamine receptors, meaning you need more sugar to get the same pleasure hit, leading to a cycle of cravings, overeating, and mood fluctuations. It's kind of important to understand. All of us have been there, right? Sugar hijacks the brain's reward system, making you crave more while contributing to your bad mental health, fatigue, and even insulin resistance. So many of my patients talk to me about this. It's difficult for them to be able to get off that cycle. Let's talk about insulin, right? The body's response to sugar and carbohydrates. So once sugar enters your bloodstream, insulin, that's the hormone that regulates blood sugar, kicks in. And that insulin is produced by the pancreas. That's an organ kind of deep in your abdomen, and that produces, that insulin is produced from. And it works like a key, unlocking cells to absorb the glucose for energy. So it's important to understand that. It helps the body incorporate that sugar. And then eating sugar and refined carbohydrates causes the blood sugar levels to rise rapidly. Pancreas releases insulin to bring blood sugar back down to normal levels. If sugar intake is excessive, the pancreas produces more and more insulin over time. Guess what happens with that? Insulin resistant it starts to happen, where cells, they stop responding properly to insulin, making it harder to regulate blood sugar. It's kind of like somebody keeps yelling at you, yelling at you, yelling at you, yelling at you. Finally, you just like don't listen to them, right? Your body then develops this kind of insulin resistance. And chronic insulin resistance can do what? Lead to weight gain. It's a crisis in our world where we have people overweight and obesity is a crisis. It can also lead to what? Fatigue. Like 75% of my patients that come and see me, number one complaint, I'm tired, I'm fatigued. Chronic insulin resistance can give you that. You can get type 2 diabetes. So many of my patients are diabetic, and I know family members are type 2 diabetes as well. And then chronic insulin resistance can increase inflammation, all of which are linked to mental health issues, right? So then comes to a vicious cycle, sugar, insulin, and dopamine. So let's kind of connect the dots between sugar, insulin, dopamine, and emotional eating, right? So step one, sugar causes a dopamine rush. Eating sugar or high-carb foods, floods the brain with dopamine, giving you a temporary mood boost. Then this reinforces your cravings and emotional eating. Step two, blood sugar spikes, right? As the sugar flows, it floods actually to the bloodstream, right? The sugar is coming in. Insulin is released to lower blood sugar. Higher insulin levels then drive sugar into the cells quickly, causing the blood sugar levels to what? Crash. And the blood sugar crash triggers more cravings. Starting to make sense? Right? The sudden drop in blood sugar can make you feel fatigued, irritable, anxious, and hungry again. You pick up that candy bar, right? You get that, you can feel good, and your blood sugar's high, and then bam, you crash. You're like, oh, get away from me. I don't want to talk to anybody. Remember, you get that hangry feeling. And that's what happens, and that leads to more sugar cravings, restarting this entire cycle again. So the more frequently the cycle repeats, right, the harder it becomes for insulin to regulate blood sugar efficiently. Insulin resistance then leads to higher baseline blood sugar levels, increasing inflammation, and greater risk of obesity, depression, and cognitive decline. And not only, mention diabetes that we talked about. So this is a really, really important concept to understand. Also, dopamine receptors become desensitized over time. This constant sugar consumption reduces this dopamine sensitivity. Means, guess what? It's just like an addict who has cocaine, right? You need more and more of it to feel the same high. You need more sugar to feel the same high, and it increases your addictive food behaviors. You need more of that crap, more and more and more to feel the same way. So how does this contribute to mental health issues, right? So chronic insulin resistance leads to inflammation, which to me is the cornerstone of all disease, including a major driver of depression. High sugar intake has been linked to lower levels of BDNF, important, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. It's a big word, but it's a protein that's crucial for brain function and neuroplasticity, how the brain can react to things. Low BDNF associated with depression and cognitive decline. Super important to understand that, right? And blood sugar spikes and crashes can trigger the release of something that we have heard of, cortisol. That's kind of your stress hormone. In small increments, it's good, but when you continue to have it, it can make you feel more anxious, jittery, and irritable. You've all been there, right? You feel like, I just can't feel that ease. You feel that dis-ease. And what do we call disease, right? When you have that dis-ease, when you feel that jitteriness, irritability, and chronic stress, and sugar intake can also decrease and deplete something that's super important to have, serotonin. When you deplete serotonin, anxiety and mood disorders can happen. Serotonin is super important for you to have, some stability in your mood. Now, insulin resistance can also affect how the neurons, the cells in your brain, use glucose, leading to brain fog. Ever been there where you kind of feel like you're in a fog, can't think properly, right? Can lead to poor concentrations and memory issues. I know I've had that when you're having those times when you're not doing the proper things with your diet, you can have that brain fog. You don't feel quite yourself, right? Studies have linked, in fact, insulin resistance to an increased risk of Alzheimer's disease, often referred to as quote-unquote type 3 diabetes. In Alzheimer's disease, you see these neurofibrillary tangles, which are inflammatory tangles in your brain. So how do you break the sugar, insulin, dopamine cycle, right? Now there's a problem. What do? Now that we understand kind of the science behind sugar, dopamine, insulin, we got to talk about how to break that cycle, have a solution, regain control over cravings, mood, and energy. Step one, balance blood sugar with, guess what, protein and healthy fats. So protein and healthy fats, my kids know about this really well. Whenever in the morning we tell them to have protein, healthy fats, complex carbohydrates. So protein and healthy fats slow down sugar absorption, preventing blood sugar spikes and crashes. So instead of sugary cereal, try scrambled eggs with avocado. Instead of that muffin, Greek yogurt with nuts and berries. Swap those sugary snacks for almonds, walnuts, or hummus with veggies. My 5-year-old loves hummus with veggies. My 11-year-old loves almonds, and my 12-year-old loves walnuts and hummus. He likes them all. So you can do this. This is not something that's so difficult, and you have to have some big manual or go to some course. Simple stuff, right? Step two, reduce sugar gradually to reset the dopamine sensitivity. So cutting sugar too quickly can cause withdrawal. Just like if you stop cocaine one day all of a sudden, right? It can cause withdrawal. So reduce it gradually. Try swapping soda for sparkling water and processed snacks for whole foods. Try to increase the fiber intake. My wife and my sister love chia seeds as well. Try leafy greens and beans. And this slows glucose absorption, especially those of you who are diabetic. Chia seeds are really good. Step three, support your natural dopamine production instead of having it bombed like having a sugar high to get the dopamine up. Do something different. So remember, since sugar hijacks the dopamine system, you need other ways to boost dopamine naturally. So even a 20-minute walk can release dopamine. Do you know that? That's amazing, right? Sunlight and vitamin D can help regulate dopamine receptors, right? Quality sleep. This is something I am challenged with, right? You have to have good sleep. Poor sleep, guess what? Disrupts both insulin sensitivity and dopamine balance. Cold showers, research have shown, guess what? The cold showers and cold exposure can boost dopamine, are you ready? By 250%. Meditation and deep breathing lowers stress and stabilizes dopamine levels. Step four, manage stress without using food. I'll say it again, manage stress without using food. Since stress is such a major trigger for emotional eating, focus on non-food stress relievers. Let's try breathing exercises, right? Box breathing, 4, 7, 8 methods. Try journaling. Listen to music. I love that part. I used to, even when I had stressful tests coming up, always listen to music. Something I do also is practicing gratitude. When I go to bed, practicing gratitude. You can do it any time of the day, but I like to do it right before bedtime. It really helps me center, helps me really focus on what I'm thankful for, right? Spend time in nature. All these will be helpful. Step 5 is heal insulin resistance through gut health. I love this. The gut microbiome, which is a trillion-member army in your gut, plays a key role in insulin sensitivity and dopamine balance. You can support gut health with fermented foods. Pick your favorite. Yogurt, sauerkraut, kimchi. You can try kombucha, whatever you like. And prebiotic-rich foods like onion, garlic, and asparagus, right? And you reduce processed foods and added sugars. That'll help to lower inflammation. So the sugar-insulin dopamine cycle is a real and powerful force. Not for good, right? It's not for good. It's actually is a negative force. It can affect mental health, energy levels, can affect your cravings and weight. The key to breaking this cycle, balance your blood sugar, and that supports dopamine naturally, right? You want techniques that supports dopamine naturally. And then managing stress without using food as a crutch. Hey, you want to learn more? Subscribe to my podcast and check out our resources on brain health, gut health, and mood-boosting nutrition. I want you all to stay strong, stay healthy, and keep being a health hero. Thank you.